The summer of 1990 held so much promise for 18-year-old Barrett Lynn Beck. Fresh out of high school, with a bright future ahead of her, she had just landed her first office job and was excited about pursuing her dreams in music. But on a warm July morning, as she set out for what should have been a routine work trip, Barrett had no way of knowing she would never return home. Welcome back to True Crime Watch HD. Before we dive into this haunting case that went unsolved for nearly 3 decades, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories. Barrett grew up in the quiet town of Sturtevant, Wisconsin, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, and serious crime was practically unheard of. A talented violinist in her school orchestra, Barrett was known for her warm personality and infectious smile. She had a loving family, a steady boyfriend named Kurt, and dreams of pursuing a career that combined her passion for music with a stable future. In July 1990, Barrett's new job presented an opportunity that seemed exciting at the time. A 3-day computer training seminar in Appleton, about 100 miles from home. For the teenager who had rarely traveled alone, this represented a step into adulthood, a chance to prove her independence. On the morning of July 17th, Barrett's parents helped her pack the family van, gave her a hug, and watched as she drove away. She promised to call as soon as she checked into her hotel. It was a promise she would never be able to keep. Think about that morning for a moment. How many times have we said goodbye to loved ones, assuming we'll see them again in just a few days? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, even on what seemed like an ordinary day. As hours passed without word from Barrett, her parents tried to stay calm. Maybe she was busy settling in, maybe she forgot to call, maybe the hotel's phones were having issues. But when evening came and still no word from their daughter, that nagging worry began to grow into real fear. They called the hotel. Barrett had never checked in. They reached out to her friends, her co-workers, anyone who might have heard from her. Nothing. By the next morning, when Barrett failed to show up for the seminar, her parents knew something was terribly wrong. Their worst fears were about to be confirmed in ways they could never have imagined. The initial police response was frustratingly minimal. Barrett was an adult, they reasoned, and there was no clear evidence of foul play. They simply put out a notice describing the van and waited. But what they would discover over the next 48 hours would turn this missing persons case into something far more sinister. 2 days after Barrett's disappearance, police received a tip about a van matching the description, parked near a supermarket in West Bend, about 65 miles from Barrett's home. What they found inside that van would send chills down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. If you're invested in learning the truth about Barrett's case, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Watch HD. This story takes some shocking turns, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Inside the van, investigators found a scene that told a disturbing story. Barrett's red shirt lay torn on the floor. Her stockings were tied in a knot. The shoes she'd worn when leaving home were there, along with the dress she'd planned to wear to the seminar. But it was what was missing, and what had been added, that painted an even more chilling picture. The van's radar detector and stereo were gone, suggesting a possible robbery. But scattered throughout the interior was something that didn't belong: cigarette ash. Lots of it. Barrett had never smoked. The discoveries inside Barrett's van pointed to something far more sinister than a simple disappearance. But one detail in particular caught investigators' attention: the van's odometer. Before Barrett left that morning, her parents had recorded the mileage for her work expenses. Now, the odometer showed an additional 461 miles had been driven. Given that the distance from her home to where the van was found was only about 65 miles, someone had taken Barrett's van on a long, mysterious journey. 2 disposable coffee cups were found inside, one from McDonald's, another from Burger King. For investigators, this seemingly minor detail raised red flags. Why would Barrett, on what should have been a direct drive to her seminar, stop at two different fast food restaurants? The answer, they would later discover, was that she hadn't. A receipt found in the van provided a crucial timeline. On July 17th, the day she disappeared, Barrett had stopped at a Walgreens across from where her van was eventually found. Store employees confirmed seeing her around noon. She was alone, appeared to be in good spirits, and nothing seemed amiss. It would be the last time anyone saw Barrett alive. But perhaps the most puzzling piece of evidence was something that wasn't stolen: a valuable ring given to her by her boyfriend Kurt. The ring, which Barrett reportedly never took off, was found deliberately hidden under one of the floor mats. This detail baffled investigators. Why would someone steal a radar detector and stereo but leave behind a valuable piece of jewelry? Here's something to think about. What do you think this tells us about the perpetrator's true motives? Was this really about robbery, or was something more sinister at play? Share your theories in the comments below. The forensic examination of the van yielded dozens of fingerprints. After ruling out prints belonging to Barrett's family and friends, several unidentified prints remained. Prints that would prove crucial decades later. They were found on one of the coffee cups, the inside of a window, and mysteriously, on the boxes of cosmetics Barrett had just purchased at Walgreens. Meanwhile, Barrett's family refused to sit idle. They launched one of the largest civilian search efforts the area had ever seen, bringing together over 100 volunteers. They scoured hundreds of miles along Barrett's intended route, gave interviews to local news stations, and raised an impressive $75,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. If you're following this investigation closely, now would be a good time to hit that subscribe button. The twists and turns this case takes are unlike anything we've covered before on True Crime Watch HD. For over a month, the investigation seemed to hit one dead end after another. Then, on August 22nd, a local farmer made a discovery that would confirm everyone's worst fears. While driving down a rural road, about 18 miles from where Barrett's van had been found, he spotted something unusual in a roadside ditch. What he found would not only prove that Barrett had met with foul play, but would also reveal the horrifying final moments of her life. The body was too decomposed for visual identification, but dental records soon confirmed what investigators had dreaded: they had found Barrett. The medical examiner's report painted a haunting picture of her final moments. A piece of fabric from her own shirt had been tied around her head like a blindfold, suggesting she had been held captive before her death. While the exact cause of death couldn't be determined due to decomposition, evidence pointed to strangulation. The medical examiner's timeline suggested Barrett had been killed the same day she disappeared, her body lying in that ditch for over a month while her family desperately searched for answers. The discovery of Barrett's body marked a turning point in the investigation, but solving her murder would prove to be far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The path to justice would be filled with false leads, mistaken accusations, and decades of anguish for her family. The investigation into Barrett's murder initially focused on a theory that seemed to make sense: a robbery gone tragically wrong. Investigators believed someone might have broken into her van while she was at Walgreens, intending only to steal valuables. But when Barrett returned and caught them in the act, the situation turned deadly. The extra mileage on the van's odometer suggested the killer had driven aimlessly for hours before abandoning the vehicle, perhaps trying to decide what to do next. This theory led investigators to focus on individuals known for similar crimes in the area. Before long, they identified a promising suspect, a man we'll call Craig, who had a history of stealing vehicles in the vicinity of Barrett's disappearance. What caught their attention was Craig's particular method. He would steal cars, drive them around for extended periods, and then abandon them, a pattern that seemed to match perfectly with what happened to Barrett's van. The case against Craig appeared to strengthen when investigators learned that shortly after Barrett's disappearance, he had been arrested for an armed bank robbery. During his arrest, police found something intriguing in his possession: a woman's hairbrush with blonde hair tangled in its bristles. Remember, this was 1990, long before advanced DNA testing was readily available. The hair couldn't be definitively linked to Barrett, but it raised serious suspicions. If you're finding this case as fascinating as we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We dig deep into cases like these every week on True Crime Watch HD, uncovering details that many other channels miss. But the most compelling evidence against Craig came from an unexpected source: one of his own friends. This individual came forward with a shocking claim. Craig had allegedly confessed to killing Barrett and had even shown him her body in the van before disposing of it. For investigators, this seemed like the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. However, there was one major problem that the detectives couldn't overcome. Craig's fingerprints didn't match any of those found in Barrett's van. Despite this glaring inconsistency, he remained the prime suspect for years, with investigators desperately trying to build a stronger case against him. Let me ask you this: have you ever been absolutely convinced of something, only to discover later that you were completely wrong? Share your experiences in the comments below. It's fascinating how our minds can sometimes lead us down the wrong path, just as these investigators were about to discover. For 23 years, the case remained cold, with Craig as the prime suspect. But in 2013, everything changed when the case was handed over to a cold case unit for review. What these fresh eyes would discover would not only prove Craig's innocence but would lead them to the real killer, someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along. The cold case team's first discovery was both shocking and frustrating. Some of Barrett's clothing, which should have been stored as evidence, was missing. Even more surprisingly, they found that the fingerprints from the van had never been digitized. They were still stored on paper files, gathering dust for over 2 decades. When these fingerprints were finally uploaded into the modern database, investigators received a call that would change everything. 5 of the prints from Barrett's van matched a man named Dennis Brantner, a name that had never before been connected to the case. As detectives began digging into Dennis's background, they uncovered a pattern of behavior that sent chills down their spines. Dennis had a criminal record that read like a preview of Barrett's murder. He had served time for stealing cars, breaking into homes, and most disturbingly, he once broke into his ex-wife's car and waited for her, attempting to kidnap her at knife point. Fortunately, she had managed to escape. But Barrett wouldn't be as lucky. At the time of Barrett's murder, Dennis worked as a long-haul truck driver, regularly traveling through the area where she disappeared. But what really caught investigators' attention was where they found his fingerprint, on the box of cosmetics Barrett had purchased at Walgreens just minutes before she vanished. This wasn't a random occurrence or an old print. Dennis had been there, in her van, at the exact moment everything went wrong. When investigators confronted Dennis Brantner with their evidence, his reaction spoke volumes. Though he initially denied any involvement in Barrett's murder, his composure crumbled at the mention of his fingerprints in her van. Tears began flowing as he answered questions, yet he maintained his innocence, a response that only made detectives more determined to uncover the full truth. As investigators dug deeper into Dennis's past, the evidence continued to mount. His ex-wife revealed a crucial detail. Dennis was a devoted Burger King customer, rarely eating anywhere else. Remember those 2 coffee cups found in Barrett's van? One from McDonald's, her preferred choice, and one from Burger King? Dennis's fingerprint was found on the Burger King cup. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from Dennis's former co-workers at a factory where he worked after Barrett's murder. 3 different colleagues remembered him keeping a photo of a young blonde woman in his toolbox. While time made it impossible to definitively confirm if the photo was of Barrett, the resemblance was striking enough to disturb those who saw it. Another former co-worker came forward with an even more disturbing revelation. Dennis had once told her about his desires to kidnap and assault her. This pattern of behavior, combined with the physical evidence, painted a picture of a predator who had managed to evade justice for over 2 decades. If you've been following this case closely and haven't subscribed yet, Now is the moment. The conclusion to this story reveals just how complicated the pursuit of justice can be. In March 2015, nearly 25 years after Barrett's murder, Dennis Brantner was finally arrested and charged with her murder. But the prosecution faced a significant challenge. While Dennis's fingerprints proved he had been in Barrett's van, they couldn't definitively prove he had killed her. In an era where juries had come to expect DNA evidence, fingerprints alone might not be enough. The first trial in 2016 ended in a mistrial. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. For Barrett's family, it was like losing her all over again. The man they believed had taken their daughter's life was still walking free. When preparing for the second trial in 2018, prosecutors faced a difficult decision. They needed to prove Dennis had attacked Barrett with the intent to assault her before murdering her, but establishing this beyond reasonable doubt after so many years would be challenging. If they failed again, Dennis could never be tried for the crime again. After careful consideration and consultation with Barrett's family, prosecutors made a heart-wrenching decision. They offered Dennis a plea deal. He would plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter. The maximum sentence? 10 years. With time served, he would serve just 7 years, meaning he would be released at age 71. For Barrett's parents, the sentence felt impossibly light for the magnitude of their loss. But they understood the reality. Without accepting this deal, there was a very real possibility that Dennis would escape punishment entirely. In a bitter twist of justice, the cold case investigation also revealed that Craig, the original suspect, had been falsely accused. The friend who claimed Craig had confessed and shown him Barrett's body had fabricated the entire story out of personal spite, using details he'd overheard from police to make his lie more convincing. Today, Barrett's memory lives on through a scholarship established by her parents at her high school, awarded for excellence in music. A fitting tribute to a young woman whose life was cut tragically short just as she was beginning to pursue her dreams. What are your thoughts on this resolution? Was justice served, even if it came decades later and in a compromised form? Share your perspectives in the comments below. Barrett's case reminds us that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still be served through dedication and advances in technology. But it also shows us how the pursuit of truth can be complicated by time, circumstance, and the limitations of our legal system. Thank you for joining us for this episode of True Crime Watch HD. Remember to like this video if you found Barrett's story as compelling as we did, and subscribe for more in-depth true crime investigations. Until next time, stay safe.